The cargo ship Wandering Star drifted through the cold darkness between stars. It was an old ship, built 40 years ago when humanity first started exploring beyond their home system. The paint on its hull had faded to a dull gray, and the engines made sounds that the mechanics said were normal but never sounded normal to anyone else. Inside the ship, in a small cabin near the medical bay, a little girl named Sophie was drawing pictures on a data pad. She was 8 years old, with brown hair that her mother always tried to braid, but that always came loose within an hour. Her eyes were green like her father's had been, and she had a small scar on her chin from when she fell off a cargo crate 2 years ago. Sophie was drawing a picture of Earth. She had never been to Earth. She had been born on a colony world called New Montana, a dusty place with red soil and 2 small moons. But her mother had shown her pictures of Earth, with its blue oceans and green forests and white clouds, and Sophie thought it was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. She wanted to go there someday. The door to her cabin opened, and her mother walked in. Cooper was a tall woman with tired eyes and hands that were rough from years of work. She had been a farmer on New Montana before the came. Now she was a refugee, like everyone else on the Wandering Star. "Sophie, honey, are you hungry?" asked. She sat down on the edge of Sophie's bed and looked at the drawing on the data pad. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Is that Earth?" Sophie nodded. "I want to see the ocean, Mama. Is the ocean really that big?" Smiled, but there was something sad in her smile. "It's bigger than you can imagine, baby. Someday we'll go there, I promise." Sophie looked at her mother's face. Even at 8 years old, she could tell when her mother was worried. And her mother had been worried a lot lately, ever since they left New Montana, ever since they destroyed their home. "Mama, are the bad aliens going to find us?" Smile faded. She reached out and touched Sophie's cheek. "No, baby, we're safe here. The captain says we're almost to the coalition station. Once we get there, we'll be protected." "But the bad aliens are strong," Sophie said. "Everyone says so. They say they have 1,000 ships and they eat people and they never stop hunting." "People say a lot of things when they're scared," said. "They are dangerous, yes, but they're not invincible, and we have friends who will help us. The coalition has been fighting them for years. They know how to stop them." Sophie wanted to believe her mother. She really did. But she had seen what they did to New Montana. She had seen the sky turn red with fire. She had heard the screams. She had watched her father run back toward their house to get their emergency supplies and never come back. She still had nightmares about that night. "Mama," Sophie said quietly, "I miss Daddy." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. She pulled Sophie into a hug and held her tight. "I miss him too, baby, every single day." They stayed like that for a long moment, mother and daughter holding each other in the small cabin of an old cargo ship drifting through space. Outside, the stars watched silently, as they always did. Then the alarm started. It was a loud, harsh sound that made Sophie jump. Red lights began flashing in the corridor outside her cabin. Stood up quickly, her face going pale. "Stay here," she said. "Don't leave this room no matter what. Do you understand me?" "Mama, what's happening?" "Just stay here, Sophie. Promise me." Sophie nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I promise." Kissed her forehead and ran out of the cabin. The door closed behind her, and Sophie was alone with the red flashing lights and the screaming alarm. She sat on her bed, hugging her data pad to her chest, and tried not to cry. On the bridge of the Wandering Star, Captain Daniel Hayes stared at the sensor display with a feeling of cold dread settling into his stomach. He was a man of 53 years, with gray hair and a beard that he kept neatly trimmed. He had been flying cargo ships for 30 years, and in all that time, he had never seen anything like what was on his sensors now. 3 ships, warships. They had appeared out of nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel less than 100 kilometers away. Their hulls were black and covered with strange organic patterns that seemed to move and shift even as Hayes watched. Each ship was twice the size of the Wandering Star, and each one was armed with weapons that could tear his old cargo ship apart in seconds. "How did they find us?" asked his first officer, a young woman named Maria Santos. Her voice was steady, but Hayes could see the fear in her eyes. We've been running silent for 3 days. There's no way they could have tracked us. They have ways we don't understand, Hayes said. He turned to his communications officer. Get me a channel to those ships. Maybe we can negotiate. Negotiate? Maria said. Captain, they don't negotiate. They take what they want and they kill everyone else. You know that. I know that we have 400 refugees on this ship, including 60 children, Hayes said. I know that we have no weapons and no way to outrun them, so unless you have a better idea, I'm going to try talking. Maria had no better idea. No one did. The communications officer, a nervous young man named Peter, worked his console for a moment. Channel open, sir. Hayes took a deep breath. Vessels, this is Captain Daniel Hayes of the cargo ship Wandering Star. We are a civilian vessel carrying refugees from the New Montana colony. We have no weapons and pose no threat to you. We request safe passage to Coalition space. There was a long moment of silence. Then a voice came through the speakers, and it was unlike any voice Hayes had ever heard. It was deep and wet-sounding, like something speaking from underwater. The translator software struggled to convert it into human language. Human vessel, the voice said. You carry cargo that belongs to the Dominion. You will surrender your ship and all passengers. Resistance will result in destruction. Hayes felt his hands tighten on the armrests of his chair. We carry no cargo, only refugees, people who escaped when your forces attacked New Montana. Escaped, the voice said, and there was something like amusement in its tone. Nothing escapes the Dominion. You have delayed the inevitable, nothing more. Surrender now, and some of you may be permitted to serve. Resist, and all will be consumed. Maria leaned close to Hayes. Captain, we can't surrender these people to the, you know what they do to prisoners. Hayes knew, everyone knew. They were not just conquerors, they were harvesters. They took prisoners and used them for labor, for experimentation, for food. The stories that came out of space were like something from humanity's darkest nightmares. How long until we can reach Coalition space? Hayes asked quietly. At maximum speed, 6 hours, Maria said. But those ships will catch us in 20 minutes. And the distress signal. Sent, but the nearest Coalition patrol is at least 4 hours away. Even if they come at full speed, they won't reach us in time. Hayes closed his eyes. 400 people, 60 children, and there was nothing he could do to save them. Then Peter spoke up from his console. Captain, I'm picking up another ship. It just dropped out of FTL, bearing 270. Another ship? Maria asked. No, ma'am. The signature is different. It's small, maybe a light cruiser, and it's transmitting a Coalition identification code. Hayes opened his eyes, put it on screen. The main display flickered and a new ship appeared. It was small compared to the warships, maybe a third of their size. Its hull was painted in dark blue and gray, the colors of the Coalition Navy. On its side, Hayes could make out a name, Dawn's Edge. We're being hailed, Peter said. Audio only. Put it through. A new voice filled the bridge, and this one was human. It was a woman's voice, calm and confident. Wandering Star, this is Commander Ford of the Coalition vessel Dawn's Edge. We received your distress signal. Hang tight, we're here to help. Maria stared at the display in disbelief. 1 ship, against 3 warships, she's insane. Hayes wasn't so sure. He had heard stories about the Dawn's Edge. It was supposed to be some kind of special operations vessel, crewed by people who had been fighting the longer than anyone else. The stories said they had done impossible things. The stories said they never lost. Of course, stories were often exaggerated. Commander Ford, Hayes said, we appreciate the help, but you're outnumbered and those are Hunter-class warships. Your vessel doesn't stand a chance against them. With respect, Captain, Commander Ford replied, you let me worry about the odds. Your job is to keep your people calm and get ready to move. When I give the signal, you head for Coalition space at maximum speed and don't look back. What signal? Trust me, you'll know it when you see it. The channel closed. On the bridge of the Dawn's Edge, Commander Ford stood at the center of a controlled chaos. Her crew moved around her with practiced efficiency, preparing the ship for combat. They were a small crew, only 40 people, but every one of them was a veteran. Every one of them had lost someone to the... Herself had lost her entire family. She was 38 years old, with short black hair and eyes that some people said were too cold. She had a scar on her left cheek from a piece of shrapnel that had almost killed her during the Battle of Prime. She walked with a slight limp from an injury that had never quite healed right. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the mission. "Status report," she said. Her tactical officer, a big man named Jack, looked up from his console. "Weapons are hot, shields at maximum. The ships are holding position, probably trying to figure out what we're doing here." "Let them wonder. What about our special cargo?" Jack grinned. It was not a nice grin. "Ready and waiting, Commander, just say the word." Nodded, she turned to the main display where the 3 warships hung like dark stains against the stars. She had fought them for 15 years. She knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their psychology. She knew that they were arrogant. They had conquered 100 worlds and a dozen species. They believed themselves to be the ultimate predators of the galaxy. They were wronged. "Open a channel to the flagship," said. Her communications officer, a young woman named Amy, worked her console. "Channel open, Commander." "Vessels, this is Commander Ford of the Coalition vessel Dawn's Edge. I have a message for your commander." The wet, gurgling voice of the responded almost immediately. "You are foolish to challenge us, human. 1 small ship against 3 warships. You will be destroyed and your crew will be consumed." "Maybe," said. "But before you try to destroy us, I think you should know something. We've been tracking your hunting patterns for months. We know you've been targeting refugee ships. We know you've been harvesting civilians. And we know that you answer to the 3rd clutch of the Dominion Council." There was a moment of silence. When they spoke again, there was something different in its voice, something that might have been surprise. "How do you know this?" "Because we've made it our business to know," said. "We've studied your species. We've learned your language, your culture, your biology. We know that the 3rd clutch has been losing favor with the Dominion Council because of your failures against the Coalition. We know that your commander, Vessel Master, needs a victory to maintain his position. That's why you're hunting refugees. Easy targets, easy victories. You know nothing, human. I know that if you lose 3 ships to a single Coalition cruiser, the 3rd clutch will be finished. The Dominion Council will strip of his rank and feed him to the larvae pits. I know that you're afraid." They made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret. It might have been anger. It might have been something else. "You cannot defeat us," they said. "You are small and weak. Your species is young and foolish. You have no idea what you face." Smiled. It was a cold smile. The smile of someone who had seen too much death to be afraid anymore. "Let me tell you something about humans," she said. "You're right. We're young. Compared to your species, we've barely existed. You've been conquering the galaxy for 10,000 years. We've been in space for less than 300. But in those 300 years, do you know what we've learned?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air. "We've learned that the universe is full of things that want to kill us. Radiation, vacuum, asteroids, diseases, and species like you. Things that are bigger and stronger and older than we are. Things that should have wiped us out a long time ago, but we're still here. Do you know why?" They did not respond. "Because we don't give up," said. "Because every time the universe throws something at us, we get back up and we fight. Because we're too stubborn and too angry and too determined to die. You've conquered 100 worlds. We've survived 100 extinctions. You've harvested a dozen species. We've crawled out of ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions of our own kind. You think you're predators? We invented the concept." She leaned forward, her cold eyes fixed on the display. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn your ships around and leave. You're going to let these refugees go. And you're going to report back to your Dominion Council that humanity is not prey. We are not victims. We are not easy targets. We are the species that crawled out of the mud and looked up at the stars and said, 'We're coming for you.' And we meant it." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then the commander spoke, and his voice was filled with rage. "You will die screaming, human, all of you. We will take your ship and your crew, and we will consume you slowly. We will find your and we will burn it. We will hunt your species to extinction. This I swear. You can try, said, but I should warn you, we brought something special for this occasion. Jack. Jack pressed a button on his console. On the hull of the Dawn's Edge, a hidden compartment opened. Inside was a weapon that the Coalition had been developing for years, a weapon based on captured technology and human ingenuity. It was called the Lance, and it was about to make history. The weapon fired. A beam of brilliant white light shot across space, striking the lead warship directly in its center mass. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the warship began to glow. The glow spread across its hull, growing brighter and brighter until the ship looked like a small star. Then it exploded. The explosion was massive. It sent shockwaves rippling through space, pushing the other two ships back. Debris scattered in all directions, glowing fragments of what had been a vessel crewed by 300 warriors. On the bridge of the Dawn's Edge, the crew watched in silence. One down, Jack said quietly. Target the second ship, said, and open a channel to the Wandering Star, tell them to run. The second ship tried to flee. It turned away from the Dawn's Edge and began accelerating toward open space. But the Lance was already tracking it. The weapon fired again, and the second ship died the same way as the first, consumed by a light so bright it hurt to look at. The third ship did not try to run. Instead, it turned toward the Dawn's Edge and charged, its weapons blazing. Green energy beams slashed through space, striking the Coalition ship's shields. The bridge shook, and somewhere in the distance heard metal screaming. Shields at 60%, Jack reported. They're trying to close the distance. The Lance needs 30 seconds to recharge. Then let's buy ourselves 30 seconds, said. All weapons fire at will, helm evasive maneuvers. The Dawn's Edge was not built for direct combat. It was a special operations vessel, designed for stealth and surprise. But its crew had been in spots than this. They fought with everything they had, lasers and missiles and kinetic rounds pouring into the ship's shields. 20 seconds. The ship fired again, and this time the green beams punched through the Dawn's Edge's shields and struck the hull. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in. A fire broke out in the engineering section, and 3 crew members were killed instantly. 15 seconds. Gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white. She could feel the ship shuddering around her, could hear her crew shouting orders and damage reports. But she didn't look away from the display. She watched the ship growing larger and larger as it closed the distance. 10 seconds. Commander, Jack said, his voice tight. They're preparing to board us. I'm detecting assault pods launching from their hull. How many? 6, maybe 30 warriors each. 180 warriors. Against a crew of 40 humans, many of whom were already injured or dead. 5 seconds. Lance is charged, Jack said. Fire. The weapon fired for the 3rd time. The beam struck the ship just as it was releasing its assault pods. For a moment, the ship seemed to hang in space, frozen in time. Then it exploded, and the assault pods exploded with it, consumed by the same brilliant light that had destroyed their mothership. Silence fell over the bridge of the Dawn's Edge. Let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked around at her crew, at the damage to the bridge, at the bodies of 2 officers who had been killed when a console exploded. Damage report, she said quietly. Shields are gone, Jack said. Hull breaches on decks 3, 4, and 7. Engines are at 40%. Life support is holding, but we've got fires in 3 sections. He paused. We lost 11 people, Commander. 11 people, 11 of her crew dead, closed her eyes for a moment, letting the grief wash over her. Then she pushed it aside. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, she had a job to finish. Contact the Wandering Star, she said. Make sure they got clear. Amy worked her console. They're responding, Commander. They made it. They're on course for Coalition space at maximum speed. Captain Hayes is requesting permission to come aboard and thank you personally. Tell him that won't be necessary. Tell him to get those refugees to safety. That's all the thanks I need. Yes, ma'am. Stood up from her chair, wincing as the movement pulled at injuries she hadn't noticed receiving. She walked to the main display and looked at the debris field that had been 3 warships. Hundreds of warriors dead, because they had made the mistake of threatening humans. "Commander," Jack said, "what do we do now?" Turned away from the display. "Now we limp back to the nearest coalition station for repairs, and then we go hunting again. They have been attacking refugee ships for months. Today we sent them a message. Tomorrow we make sure they understand it." "And what message is that?" Looked at her tactical officer, and there was something fierce in her cold eyes. "That humans protect their own," she said, "no matter the cost." On the wandering star, the refugees were celebrating. Word had spread quickly through the ship that they were destroyed, that they were safe, that a coalition vessel had appeared out of nowhere and saved them. People were laughing and crying and hugging each other, releasing weeks of fear and tension in a flood of emotion. In her small cabin, Sophie was still sitting on her bed, hugging her data pad. She hadn't moved since her mother left. She had heard the alarms and felt the ship shake and heard people screaming in the corridors, but she had kept her promise. She had stayed in her room. Now the door opened, and her mother ran in. "Sophie, Sophie, baby, are you okay?" Sophie jumped off the bed and threw herself into her mother's arms. "Mama, what happened? I heard explosions and I was so scared and I thought the bad aliens got us and I didn't know what to do and—" "It's okay," said, holding her daughter tight. "It's okay, baby, we're safe. The bad aliens are gone. Someone saved us." "Who?" Smiled through her tears. "The Coalition, a ship called the Dawn's Edge. 1 ship, Sophie, 1 ship against 3 warships, and they won." Sophie pulled back and looked at her mother's face. "Really? 1 ship beat 3 ships?" "Really? The captain says it was the bravest thing he's ever seen. They came out of nowhere and they fought for us. They didn't even know us, but they fought for us anyway." Sophie thought about this. She thought about the scary and the big warships and the 1 small coalition vessel that had stood between them and the refugees. She thought about what it meant to be brave, to fight for people you didn't know, to risk everything to protect strangers. "Mama," she said, "when I grow up, I want to be like them. I want to help people." Hugged her daughter again. "You can be whatever you want to be, Sophie, anything at all." "I want to be brave." "You already are, baby. You already are." The wandering star continued on its course toward coalition space. Behind it, the debris of 3 warships drifted in the cold darkness, a monument to human defiance. Ahead, the stars waited, full of danger and wonder and possibility. And on a small data pad, a picture of Earth glowed softly in the dark. 6 months later, the Dominion Council received a report from the Third Clutch. The report detailed the loss of 3 warships, 500 warriors, and 1 vessel master who had been executed for his failure. But it also contained something else, something that troubled the Council far more than the loss of ships and soldiers. It contained a warning. The humans were not what the Dominion had believed. They were not weak and fearful prey, waiting to be harvested. They were predators, fierce and cunning and utterly relentless. They had weapons that could destroy ships with a single shot. They had warriors who would fight against impossible odds without hesitation. They had a determination that bordered on insanity. And they were protecting each other. This was what troubled the Council most of all. They did not understand the concept of protection. In their society, the weak were consumed by the strong. Larvae who could not fight were eaten by their siblings. Adults who failed in their duties were fed to the pits. The idea of risking one's life to protect strangers, of sacrificing ships and warriors for people who offered nothing in return, was incomprehensible. But the humans did it anyway. The Council debated for many days. Some argued for increasing the assault on human space, pouring resources into crushing this strange species before they became a greater threat. Others argued for caution, for studying the humans more carefully before engaging them further. A few, the oldest and of the Council, suggested something that had never been done before in the history of the Dominion. They suggested leaving the humans alone. "They are young," the eldest said. "They have barely left there. In time they may grow weak as other species have grown weak. In time they may forget their ferocity. Let them expand into the galaxy. Let them build their colonies and their stations. When they have grown soft and comfortable, then we will harvest them." The council considered this proposal. It was not popular. They were not patient. They had conquered the galaxy through aggression and violence, not through waiting. But the loss of 3 warships to a single human vessel had shaken them. For the first time in 10,000 years, they were afraid. In the end, they agreed to wait. But they did not forget. And neither did the humans. Commander Ford stood on the observation deck of Coalition Station Alpha, looking out at the stars. Behind her, the station hummed with activity, thousands of people going about their lives, building and working and hopping for a future free from the threat. In her hand, she held a data pad with the latest intelligence reports. They were pulling back from the borders of human space. Their hunting parties had stopped targeting refugee ships. The Dominion Council, according to intercepted communications, had classified humanity as a Category 7 species, whatever that meant. It meant they were afraid. Should have felt satisfied. She had spent 15 years fighting 15 years watching friends die and colonies burn and refugees flee from the relentless advance of the Dominion. Now, for the first time, they were retreating. For the first time, humanity had won. But knew it wasn't over. They were patient. They had been conquering the galaxy for 10,000 years. They could wait a few decades, a few centuries, sooner or later they would come back. And when they did, humanity would need to be ready. The door to the observation deck opened, and a young woman walked in. She was wearing the uniform of a Coalition Navy cadet, and her eyes were bright with excitement and nervousness. "Commander Ford," she said, "I'm Cadet Sophie Cooper. I've been assigned to the Dawn's Edge as a trainee." Looked at the young woman. There was something familiar about her face, about the shape of her chin and the color of her eyes. Cooper said, "Were you on the Wandering Star 6 months ago?" Sophie nodded. "Yes, ma'am. My mother and I were refugees from New Montana. You saved us." Remembered now? The cargo ship full of refugees, the 3 warships, the desperate battle. She remembered the report she had received afterward, the names of all the people on that ship. She remembered a little girl named Sophie who had been drawing pictures of Earth. "I remember," said, "you were 8 years old." "I'm 18 now, ma'am. I enlisted as soon as I was old enough." Sophie straightened her shoulders. "I want to help people like you helped us. I want to protect the ones who can't protect themselves." Studied the young woman for a long moment. She saw the determination in her eyes, the fierce light that came from someone who had seen the worst the universe had to offer and decided to fight back. She saw a younger version of herself. "It's a hard life," said. "You'll see things that will give you nightmares, you'll lose friends, you'll make decisions that haunt you forever. Are you sure this is what you want?" "Yes, ma'am. I've never been more sure of anything." Nodded slowly. She held out her hand. "Welcome aboard, Cadet Cooper. The Dawn's Edge could use someone with your determination." Sophie shook her hand, and her smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Thank you, Commander. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." As Sophie left the observation deck, turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there, they were waiting. Somewhere out there, other species were suffering under the Dominion's rule. Somewhere out there, the battle for the galaxy's future was still being fought. But humanity was ready. They had crawled out of the mud and looked up at the stars and decided that they would not be prey. They had faced extinction 100 times and survived. They had built ships and weapons and alliances. They had become the protectors of the weak, the defenders of the helpless, the champions of those who could not fight for themselves. They had called them young and foolish. They had called them weak and small. They had threatened to hunt them to extinction. They were wronged. Smiled, and for a moment the coldness in her eyes was replaced by something warmer. Pride, maybe, or hope. "Touch our people again," she whispered to the stars, "and we'll tear you apart." The stars did not answer, but somewhere in the darkness they heard the message, and for the first time in their long and bloody history they trembled. Because humanity was coming. And humanity protected its own. The years passed, as years do. The coalition grew stronger. More ships were built. More weapons were developed. More alliances were forged with other species who had suffered under rule. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival became something more, a crusade to free the galaxy from the Dominion's grip. Sophie Cooper rose through the ranks quickly. She had her mother's determination and her father's courage, and she had learned from the best. Commander Ford had trained her personally, teaching her everything she knew about fighting the. By the time she was 25, Sophie was commanding her own ship. By the time she was 30, she was leading entire fleets. But she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the little girl on the wandering star, drawing pictures of Earth and dreaming of the ocean. She never forgot the terror of hearing those alarms and waiting in her cabin, not knowing if she would live or die. She never forgot the moment when her mother told her they were saved. She never forgot that one ship had stood against three and won. On the 10th anniversary of the Battle of the Wandering Star, as it came to be known, Sophie returned to the spot where it had happened. She stood on the bridge of her ship, the Dawn's Light, named in honor of the vessel that had saved her, and looked out at the debris that still drifted in the cold darkness. They had never recovered those bodies. They had never claimed their dead. In culture, those who fell in battle were simply forgotten, their names erased from history, their existence. But humans were different. Humans remembered. "This is Admiral Sophie Cooper," she said into the ship's communication system. 10 years ago on this spot, Commander Ford and the crew of the Dawn's Edge gave their lives to protect a ship full of refugees. They did not know us. They had no reason to care about us, but they fought for us anyway. They died for us anyway, because that is what humans do. We protect each other. We fight for each other. We die for each other. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Today, I want to make a promise to Commander Ford, to all the people who have died fighting to all the children who are still drawing pictures of places they've never seen. I promise that their sacrifice was not in vain. I promise that we will keep fighting. I promise that we will win. She looked out at the stars, at the infinite darkness that had once seemed so terrifying. They think they are the predators of this galaxy. They think they can hunt and harvest and consume without consequence. They are wrong. Because every time they threaten our people, every time they touch our children, every time they think they can break us, we come back stronger. We come back angrier. We come back more determined than ever. Her voice hardened, becoming the voice of a warrior, the voice of a protector, the voice of humanity itself. So here's our message to the Dominion. Here's our message to every species in this galaxy that thinks they can prey on the weak and the helpless. Touch our people again, go ahead, try it, see what happens. She smiled, and it was the same cold smile that Ford had worn all those years ago. "We'll devour you." The message was broadcast across every frequency in every language to every corner of the galaxy. They heard it. The Coalition heard it. Species that had never encountered humans heard it and wondered what kind of creatures would send such a message. The answer was simple. Humans. The species that crawled out of the mud. The species that survived ice ages and plagues and wars. The species that looked up at the stars and decided to claim them. The species that protected its own, no matter the cost. The cubs who had learned to bite back. And somewhere, in a small cabin on a refugee transport heading for Earth, a little boy was drawing pictures of strange alien worlds he had never seen. His mother sat beside him, telling him stories about the brave humans who fought against the monsters in the dark, about the ships that appeared out of nowhere to save people, about the warriors who never gave up, never surrendered, never stopped protecting the innocent. The boy listened with wide eyes. "Mama," he said, "when I grow up, I want to be brave like them." His mother smiled. "You can be whatever you want to be, sweetheart, anything at all." "I want to protect people." "Then you will, I know you will." Outside the window, the stars passed by like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Each one a sun. Each one a possibility. Each one a world that might need protecting someday. And humanity would be ready. Because that was what humans did. They protected each other. They fought for each other. They loved each other, fiercely and completely and without reservation. And if anything threatened those they loved, they would tear the galaxy apart to keep them safe. Touch her again, touch him again. Touch any human child, any human family, any human world. And find out what happens when you anger a species that survived everything the universe threw at them and still came out swinging. They would learn this lesson. So would every other predator in the galaxy. Because humanity was done being prey. Humanity was done being afraid. Humanity was done running. From now on, humanity was the one doing the hunting. And they would never, ever stop. This is the promise that humans made to each other, to their children, to the stars themselves. We will protect you. We will fight for you. We will die for you. And we will win. No matter how long it takes. No matter how hard it gets. No matter how many times we fall. We will get back up. We will keep fighting. We will keep protecting. Because that is who we are. That is what we do. We are human. And we never give up. The end.